On a bitter February morning, Matthew Hale opened his eyes to a cabin still warm. The frost had not even crawled across the window panes. His peat fire glowed red in the hearth, smoldering deep into its 8th hour. From the next cabin over, a child's cough cut through the silence, wet and rattling.
That cough is worse than yesterday.
His own cabin held the heat of a slow-burning peat brick, while the rest of the settlement froze in their beds. But 4 months earlier, the same man had been the town's fool.
You are burning mud, Hale. You are a fool.
Matthew kept cutting, his only answer the slick, wet sound of the spade. Now, in the dead of winter, that fool's fire was the only one still burning, and a child's life hung in the balance, waiting for warmth that only Matthew Hale could give. That long summer, Matthew Hale spent every daylight hour out in the bog, cutting dark slabs of peat.
You're wasting your back, Hale. That mud ain't worth a penny in winter.
Even the swamp won't have you, Hale. You'll be the first one frozen come December.
Matthew didn't look up. The spade drove into the wet peat with a rhythm older than the town's mockery.
Let him laugh. The bog keeps its secrets.
George Hartley kept his firewood stacked high on his store porch, waiting for cold months to drive the price into the sky. In town, folks turned their backs when Matthew passed, as if his muddy clothes carried some shame they could catch. But beside his cabin, a tower of peat bricks rose, row after row, drying in the sun. His dog never left his heel, watching the bog with a low rumble in its throat whenever anyone came near. Matthew didn't argue. He just worked, the sting of their laughter settling deep into his bones. Autumn came with a bite. Matthew stretched oilcloth over his towering peat rick, tying the corners against the wind.
First, snow ain't far off, boy.
In the hills, axes bit into pine and fir. The tree line retreated day by day. They left the slopes bald, stripping what they could before the ground froze solid. George Hartley's woodpile grew into a fortress.
They'll pay my price when the cold settles in. Wood runs out before pride does.
Matthew paid him no mind. He hauled the last of his dried peat into the loft above his bed.
Stack 'em tight. The cold don't forgive loose ends.
Then, one dawn, a skin of ice sheathed the bog, crackling under his dog's paws. The first frost had come, and Matthew Hale knew the town had laid all its trust in wood that would soon be gone. When the blizzard struck, it sealed the forest passes in a single night. The wood lots disappeared under drifts. Across the settlement, families fed their stoves twice as fast, watching their winter stores shrink hour by hour.
Let's see what you can do, little mud brick.
The peat didn't roar like wood. It smoldered low, a deep red eye that barely flickered. At 3 in the morning, the brick still held its heat. Matthew woke to a cabin warmer than any wood fire could keep.
9 hours. That mud brick's been burning 9 hours.
Outside, the wind screamed against dead chimneys, but Matthew's fire never died. George Hartley doubled his price for kindling, knowing the town had nowhere else to go.
Supply and demand. Friends, the cold don't negotiate.
And still, no one knew that Matthew Hale's cabin never went cold. By the first week of February, the settlement had burned through 2/3 of its wood. The chimneys stood cold by noon.
Please, Mr. Hartley. My boy's cough is getting worse. I can pay you in spring.
Spring don't keep a fire tonight. Mrs. Wren, no credit. Coin up front.
Martha Wren walked back into the snow, the sound of her child's cough chasing her down the street inside his cabin. Matthew heard the faint, hacking cough through the log walls. He set down his book.
That boy's been coughing for weeks now. The cold's sinking deeper into his lungs.
His dog stirred from the hearth, a low whine building in its throat.
Easy, boy. I hear it too.
The child's cough grew worse, and Matthew felt the weight of his fire pressing down on his conscience. He sat there, between a mountain of peat and a village of ice, knowing the choice was coming. Whether he was ready or not, that night, the boy's cough turned ragged, then silent. The last ember in Martha Wren's stove winked out. Martha pressed her hand to the child's forehead. stone cold. The fire was dead. The silence from that cabin was louder than any scream. Matthew pulled bricks from his stack and stepped into the cold at Martha's doorstep. He set a wicker basket filled with dark bricks. His dog nudged the snow. Martha opened her door and found a basket of dark bricks.
Peat bricks. Like the ones Matthew Hale stacked all summer.
She set the brick in the stove and watched the embers catch. The glow was deep and steady. The fire held through the night. Her boy slept without coughing for the first time in weeks. By dawn, whispers spread. The wren chimney had smoked all night with a strange, steady plume. Matthew's dog, seen near Martha's door, sniffed the air as if guarding a secret. George Hartley scoured the settlement for every last scrap of wood, hoarding it like a miser.
They'll pay in silver now. A man with wood in February owns the town.
Elias Thorne's woodpile was gone before the moon turned. His forge stayed cold.
Hale's chimney never stops smoking. Look at it. Thick as fog and twice as steady.
He was right. Matthew's cabin sent up a constant plume, visible for miles across the frozen plain. But the bog itself had become a block of iron. Axes bounced off the peat as if striking granite.
Pete, you'll choke on that black smoke. Swamp mud's got poison in it.
Yet every night, Matthew's cabin glowed warm, while the rest of the settlement disappeared into darkness.
They're starting to notice. Won't be long before somebody's banging on that door.
The secret was fraying at the edges, and the cold wasn't finished with them yet. Late that night, Martha Wren followed the smoke to its source, her footfalls muffled by the new snow. She knocked on Matthew's door, her breath clouding in the frigid air.
Mr. Hale, I know it was you. The basket. How did you make those bricks burn?
Matthew stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside.
Peat, dried from the bog. It doesn't roar, but it holds heat like nothing else.
Please, my boy. I'll pay any price. Just a few more bricks.
If I give her more, word will spread. But if I don't, that child won't last the next cold snap.
He wrapped a half-dozen bricks in burlap and showed her how to stack them for a slow, even burn.
Don't tell anyone. Not yet. Once word gets out, it won't be long before they come for my last brick.
Martha nodded, clutching the burlap to her chest. She left, her shadow swallowed by the blizzard. But a promise whispered in a blizzard is a promise half broken. By morning, 3 neighbors stood at Matthew's door, their faces gray with cold.
Hale, we saw the Wren boy alive. Tell us what you used. I'll sell my forge for a single warm night.
Matthew stared at the black soot under Elias's nails. His forge had been dead for days. He stepped back and let them in.
It's peat, dried from the bog. You burn it slow, and it'll hold through the night.
You got more? We ain't got nothing left to burn. My children's hands are blue.
The bog's frozen solid. Can't cut more until spring. What I've got in that loft is all there is.
He handed each of them 2 bricks, wrapped in cloth. Don't waste it. Keep the damper low. They left with more than fuel. They left with a name they hadn't spoken in months. Matthew Hale. By dusk, a dozen more had come, and Matthew stood in his doorway, watching his winter's work walk away piece by piece. The fool had become the firekeeper. But the fire itself was now a dwindling flame. Word of the peat reached George Hartley before his own fire burned low that night.
You fools. That swamp smoke will rot your lungs. Peat brings black lung, fits even death.
As they filed out, murmurs of fear mixed with the wind. Superstition had deep roots in hard winters. George retreated to his store, satisfied that doubt was the cheapest kind of fuel.
Let him talk. The cold doesn't listen to rumors.
A few families, afraid of the smoke, returned their peat bricks and tried to stretch one last log. George watched through his frosted window, a thin smile on his lips as his woodpile shrank slower. But the blizzard never heard a lie. It kept cutting through the walls, taking the defiant and the doubtful alike. Matthew's fire kept burning, and those who took his bricks felt the quiet proof in their bones. The town split in 2, half frozen by fear, half kept alive by mud. and the wind kept howling. Matthew climbed to his loft and counted the bricks with calloused fingers. 23.
Barely enough for me alone. If I keep giving, my fire dies with theirs.
He led a handful to the bog, picks in frozen hands. The iron bounced off the ice like a hammer on stone.
It's no use. The bog won't give anything until the thaw.
That night, alone in his cabin, he watched his fire shrink to a fist of embers. The clock struck 3.
I could seal the door, burn only for myself. I'd last till spring, but I'd hear their silence.
His dog rose from the hearth and pressed its head against his knee.
Come on, boy. We've got one last job before the cold takes us.
He pulled on his boots, stuffed his pockets with peat, and threw open the door to the howling dark. He walked into the town's frozen heart, calling every name he'd ever been mocked by. Tonight, they'd learn what mud could do. He gathered the townsfolk in the dark, their breath making ghosts, and led them to the frozen bog.
You mocked me for stacking mud. Now that mud is the only fire left in this valley.
Picks rose and fell in the bitter air, striking the ice with dull, defeated clangs.
I've broken 3 handles tonight, Matthew. This frozen ground is harder than any anvil I ever struck.
Elias tried a turf spade, the tool Matthew used in summer, but the frozen surface turned the blade.
You are fighting the frost, not the peat. We need to find where the ice is thin.
Where a spring-fed trickle had kept the ground soft, they pulled free 3 dark, wet slabs. In his cabin, Matthew arranged them on the hearthstone, letting the fire lick the moisture away.
How long until they burn, Mr. Hale? We ain't got much time.
The first wisp of peat smoke rose hours later, thin but steady. Not enough, but a beginning. George Hartley saw his woodpile shrink to nothing as the peat smoke rose. He gathered those still afraid and whispered a new lie.
That bog is cursed land. You mark my words, the fever will follow that smoke.
Some believed him. A few families left their bricks at Matthew's door, choosing to shiver with their last log rather than risk the smoke. But Martha Wren would not be swayed. She carried her boy, healthy and laughing, into the cold crowd.
This boy was dying until Mr. Hale gave us those bricks. Now look at him. He's as warm as summer.
The child's laugh cut through the cold, louder than any lie George could conjure.
I've been a fool. We all have. That mud burns cleaner than any wood I ever split.
But the days lost to fear had cost them. The few wet slabs they dug were gone, and the wood was no more.
There's one more place we can dig. A pocket of old peat I left last autumn might be dry enough.
It was a gamble on frozen ground, but it was all they had left. The dog bounded ahead, sniffing the frozen crust until it stopped at a patch of splintered ice. Matthew dropped to his knees and brushed the snow away with his bare, cracked hands.
This is it. A dry seam I left covered in October. It's not much, but it'll burn. But it's not much, but it'll burn.
One by one, they pulled dark bricks from the frozen earth, each a small victory. They carried the haul to the cabin, stacking the bricks near the glowing hearth. Elias Thorne looked at the pile, then at Matthew, his voice unsteady.
I called you a fool, and you saved my children. I'll carry that shame till the ground thaws.
You can help me split these for the others. That's all the payment I need.
That night, the cabin held more than fire. It held a fragile trust, warming from the inside out. And Matthew, the man who stacked mud all summer, finally felt the weight of the town's gratitude. The worst of the blizzards broke, and the days grew a shade longer. The settlement had not lost a single soul to the cold. Now, every morning, dark smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, peat smoke thick and steady, the scent of survival. Matthew walked the bog's edge, his dog at his side, watching the community that once mocked him now build their own ricks. But George Hartley's store stood like a tombstone. His wood bins were bare and his sign creaked in the wind. He sat inside, wrapped in his finest coat, staring at a cold hearth, too proud to step into a bog.
Still got coin, but coin don't burn.
Mr. Hale, I can't repay what you did. The boy asks for you every night before he sleeps.
Tell him the bog sent the fire. I just stacked the bricks.
The name Fool had been buried under the snow. Matthew Hale was now the man who brought fire from the earth, and across the frozen plain, George sat alone. The last man who would not bend, and the only one still freezing. A final squall swept the plain. George Hartley's last stick of wood crumbled. He stared through the ice on the window, shivering. He fought the drifts to Matthew's door and pounded with a fist he could no longer feel. Matthew pulled the door open. The merchant who had sneered at him stood broken in the snow.
Hale, I burned my last log. I got nothing. I was wrong.
Matthew said nothing. The silence between them was the coldest thing on the plain.
Please. The cold is eating my bones. I'll pay any price.
Matthew reached into the cabin, picked up a dark brick, and extended it toward his enemy.
You'll learn to cut your own come spring. The bog don't take payment in coin.
George took it. His fingers, numb and trembling, closed around the rough peat. The merchant walked back into the storm, carrying a debt he could never repay. When the ice finally cracked and the bog breathed again, Matthew led them all back. The sound of spades replaced the howl of blizzards.
Cut deep, but not greedy. Leave enough for the bog to heal. It'll give back year after year.
George Hartley stood knee-deep in the mire, his fine coat traded for rough wool. His hands blistered, but he did not stop.
Never figured I'd see Hartley muddier than a hog. Maybe there's hope for us all.
Matthew showed them how to shape the bricks, how to stack them so the wind could work its drying magic.
Mr. Hale, I swear the bog's singing today. Even the birds came back to watch.
The barren winter became a memory, buried beneath rows of dark bricks drying under the sun, and the man they had called a fool walked among them, no longer strange, but as essential as the ground itself.
I'd trade every coin I hoarded for a single day of this. The mud, it feels honest.
Matthew just nodded at the horizon, where the plain stretched toward another winter, but now the town was ready for it. By deep summer, the bog was dotted with drying ricks, and the settlement hummed with the quiet confidence of a town that would never freeze again. Elias Thorne came up the path to Matthew's cabin, a clay jug of ale swinging from his thick fingers.
Never thought I'd say it, Hale. You were right from the start.
Matthew, sitting on his porch with his dog, looked at the man who once shouted "fool" across the bog.
Didn't do it to be right, Elias. Did it to keep warm.
Warm's all that mattered this winter. My wife calls you the bog's prophet now.
A small, hard-earned smile cracked Matthew's muddy face.
No prophet. Just a man who listened to the mud.
Elias poured the ale, and they drank in silence, the ricks standing like monuments to the season they survived. The fool had become the firekeeper, and the firekeeper had finally found his place. Autumn returned, and every cabin was flanked by a sturdy rick of dried peat. George Hartley ran a small peat stand now, charging fair coin for bricks he'd cut himself.
Every brick I sell now comes with the truth. Mud burns better than greed ever did.
Matthew walked the bog alone, his dog at heel, the ricks standing like a promise across the plain. He knelt and touched the rough surface of a drying brick, its weight filled with winter's memory. The first frost silvered the grass, and he knew the town was ready. They called him a fool for stacking mud. But that mud had given fire to a frozen world, and the man who had been their joke became the quiet, steady heart of their survival. The bog bricks he'd stacked all summer had become the foundation of a future no one dared imagine. As the first flakes fell, Matthew watched the smoke rise from every chimney and smiled. That second winter, dark peat smoke rose from every chimney across the frozen plain. The wrens, the thorns, even Hartley's new peat hut all breathed steady warmth into the bitter air. Inside his own cabin, Matthew sat beside the hearth, a worn book open in his lap. His dog sprawled at his feet, snoring softly into the thick fur of its paws. The blizzard hammered the walls, but the logs did not shiver.
The mud keeps its promise.
The town that mocked him was now the town he had saved. Every chimney a testament, and no one, not even the wind, called him a fool anymore. His fire was part of a forest of smoke that ringed the valley. Matthew closed his eyes, listening to the storm with a quiet heart. Another spring thawed the bog, and the cutters returned with a rhythm older than any memory of ice. A young boy, barely tall enough to see over a rick, stopped and pointed a muddy finger.
They burn long and slow. They'll keep you warm when nothing else will.
The boy looked from the dark brick to the ricks stretching across the bog, his eyes full of wonder. Matthew ruffled the boy's hair and told him to come back in summer to learn to cut. The bog hummed with the sound of spades, a song for the winters to come. Matthew stood, his dog rising beside him, and looked over the community he had rebuilt. The fool had become the teacher, and the mud had become the legacy. And on the bog where they once mocked him, children now played among the ricks of fire. Matthew Hale, the man who stacked mud, watched the future take root, and it was warm. On a bitter December morning, Matthew Hale walked the bog with his old dog at his heel. Behind him, dark smoke rose from every chimney across the settlement. They had mocked him, called him a fool for stacking mud, but now his fire burned in every home. They mocked the bog bricks he stacked all summer until his was the only fire left in winter. The man who listened to the mud had given them a truth the forests could never match, and as the snow began to fall, Matthew turned toward his cabin. A single plume of dark smoke rose from the chimney, and the bog answered with silence. Matthew Hale, the fool who burned mud, had built a fire that would never go out.